There's probably no greater group I'd rather speak to than fathers and kids. And it looks like most the kids here are older except for just 3 or 4, which is good. Um, Kids, I'm mainly going to speak to the fathers. And you'll sit there and go, yeah. But you remember some of it too. And I asked the pastor, I have about 8 pages with all the documentation, what I say, the scripture, the principles, everything. And he'll have them at the church, in the back of the church. He's going to print them off. And I hope he can do that today so they can be there tomorrow. But you're welcome to have it all. My wife says, why are you giving your notes away all the time? I said, it forces me to research more. And I love that. Keeps you on your toes. Plus, a talk, if God gives you a message, it's a message for people to take and share with others and live it out and share it. The background for my talk here is I am a father. I have 3 daughters and a son, 11 grandchildren, and they're not cheap, but 11 grandkids. And I was afraid, I had a fear of getting married, and I had a fear of ever having children. I had to break through many barriers because growing up in Union City, Michigan, my father, I was the youngest of 4 kids. Everybody else left the home, and I was left with all the baggage. And I grew up with an alcoholic father. I hardly ever knew my father sober until I was 18, 19 years old. And I wish to God I had not grown up hating my dad. I don't care who you are. I don't even care if you become the most spiritual believer in the world. You grow up hating your dad, you are going to have consequences in your life. If you come to Jesus, whatever. Because every day I see a father spending time with their son, those flashbacks are there. That's how God made our minds. And I wish to God I could have had that with my father. But I remember when I made that decision, my children are not going to have that problem with me. And so, but how do you learn to be a good dad? How do you learn to really see your children grow in the Lord and become fruitful, productive, but most of all, loving? And so, place where I went to church, there were a few fathers who had an incredible relationship with their family and their marriage and all. So I plagiarized them. I watched them. I would get close to them. I'd listen to how they would talk to their kids, everything. And if they ever invited me to a single person house for lunch, I don't care what I had going, I'd cancel it just to be with them, to learn. And I learned so many great principles about relating to my children. So my children didn't grow up with some of the challenges that I had, but they grew up with a solid foundation to launch into life with. And men, I hope you can take notes, but probably most of you didn't come with pen and paper. Most men think they have a photographic mind, but they don't have any film. And so the notes will be printed by the pastor. And they'll be in the back of the church. There's about maybe 8 to 10 pages, all written out for you. There's some misconceptions about being a father with children. Say, one, well, you can't be a perfect parent. I hear so many dads say that. Well, you can't be and that's usually an excuse for not doing anything. Most dads have said that to me. They haven't done anything to build a relationship with their kids. But I've never met a perfect parent. If I did, I'd stay 10 feet away from them so I wouldn't ruin them. But nowhere in the Bible does it says we need to be a parent, perfect mom, dad. Second, a misconception, well, it's too late for me. It's never too late. I don't care if your child has grown up, hates you, despised you, walked away, and in jail. It is never, ever too late to start where you are. To start where you are. And I thought about writing a book about men that thought it was too late. Their kids were 20-some, 30s, 40s, even 50. And then to share how they turned that relationship around through these principles. And then a truth is this. There are some children born hard to raise. That has nothing to do with parenting skills. They're simply hard to raise. Science calls those children born with a bent twig. With a bent twig. And the problem is so many parents get so exhausted and discouraged, they give up on that child. But it's interesting, not just what the Bible emphasizes, but secular science says the one thing that will straighten that child out if the parent does not lose hope, and second, builds a relationship with that child. The one thing that would turn that child around that's born with a bent twig to straighten it out is a parent doesn't give up building that relationship around that child. And I've met so many fathers come to me that has a rough time with one or two of their children. And they want to know what they should do. I can't counsel them until I ask a few questions. One, I ask, well, what kind of relationship did you have with your father? Second, what type of relationship have you had with your children? Most men will say, oh, just wonderful. We've had a good Josh. We've had a great relationship. You talk to the kid, they hate their dad. And the dad is saying, if there's anyone blind to anything in life, it's fathers blind often to the relationship with their kids. I say one of the best things you do is talk to your children and give them immunity. That no matter what they say, they have immunity. Or give your wife immunity and ask your wife, what kind of father am I? Whoa. We might get an earful. I know I did one time. She said, honey, you're not spending time with your children. Yes, honey, you're not spending time with your children. Problem is, my wife has that gift of the Spirit called the grasp of the obvious. And she had the grasp of the obvious in my life. I wasn't spending time with my children. But I thought I was. And I wasn't. I developed 7 principles to help me be a better dad. I want to share those 7 principles with you. They'll work in any relationship, not just a father or mother with a child, but a Bible study teacher with a Bible study. The same principles work. A teacher with a classroom. A business owner with his employees. These same principles are effective, folks. Why? Because in the Bible, there's simple principles of relationships. And so it doesn't matter what situation you're in, these principles will apply in your life. The first one is affirmation. Affirmation. When we affirm a child's emotions, their feelings, we give them a sense of authenticity. I'm okay. In Romans 12:15, it says this, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Oh, I wish I'd learned that way back, even before I got married. The power of this principle. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. The New Living Translation puts it this way. Rejoice with those who rejoice means be happy with those who are happy. Weep with those who weep means, and when others are sad, share their sorrow. When others are happy, be happy with them. If they are sad, share their sorrows. I was in the Denver airport, and I had a little time there. I was walking down the concourse, and I saw this leader of one of the large Christian organizations coming, who I'd known for quite a while, and I stopped and said, how you doing? He said, oh, just great. Man, he said, we just got this big investment in our ministry, and this and that. I was kind of under the cloud. I'd had some setbacks in the ministry and things, not big setbacks, but things that worried me. And I was not the happiest person in the world. And the greatest steps of faith that I take is when I meet somebody who is happy, by faith, to be happy with them. To rejoice in their situation, regardless of my situation. There's some people I hate to meet because they dump everything on you. And it's that faith to not dump. But if you meet somebody who's rejoicing, Reach down by faith and rejoice with them. I said, oh, that's so wonderful. Wow, what a difference that can make in your life and ministry. And tell me, how did you get this? What happened? And you know, I think every time I've reached out by faith to rejoice with somebody who's rejoicing, when I was weeping, I saw positive benefits of it. God blessed me for being obedient. Affirmation. I was in our home, and my son, who was about, I don't know, 3, 4 years old maybe, was running through the house, hardwood floors, and he tripped on a throw rug. And boy, he went down and hit that hardwood floor. He immediately started to cry. My old self started to come out. You know, dads, come on, son, it couldn't hurt that much. No, come on, get up, stop crying. Be a man. I took a deep breath. I got down on my knees next to him. I leaned over to his head. It was the first time I'd ever done this. Weep with those who weep. Hurt with those who hurt. I said, son, I am so sorry. That must have really hurt, son. I hurt for you. And my son turned around and looked up and he said, thanks, Dad. That's the fruit of being obedient to Scripture. When others are happy, be happy with them. When they're sad, share their sorrow. I was in a meeting where my daughter wanted to be valedictorian, because all my kids were, I think, at one time or another. And I was sitting with her, and they were reading off who was what. And she came next to it but didn't get it. And I could tell she was very sad. I leaned over. I said, honey, I want you to hear this from your dad. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud how hard you work. I know how hard you worked and studied this material. And I know you wanted to get that position. But honey, I want you to hear this from your daddy. I am so proud of how hard you worked. Honey, you spent hours studying. And I just want to say this. If you do that the rest of your life in different things, you're going to impact your world. And she just smiled and said, thanks, Dad. When others are sad, share their feelings. When they're happy, be happy with them. It's a powerful principle. Then, after affirmation, acceptance. These all start with A's. I didn't plan that. Appreciation. When you say something, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you did. I appreciate how you helped them out. Mark Twain said, oh, this is so true. He said, I can live 2 months on a compliment. I can live 2 months on a compliment. Zesting appreciation. Here's a phrase I developed to help myself. Catch someone doing something right and express appreciation. So often as fathers, we appreciate what our kids do, but we don't express it. But when they do something wrong, we express it. I do not believe you have a right to criticize a child when they do something wrong if you do not praise them when they do something right. It'll backfire on you. And when they're about 21, 22 years old, they'll tell you that too. If you don't catch a child doing things right and express appreciation, you lose the right to catch them doing things wrong and discipline them. It'll backfire. It'll backfire. Thank you, Kelly, for raking the lawn. I really appreciate that. Then, Availability. Oh, this is so key. Availability. When we're available to a child or to an employee, to someone, where you're a pastor, and you use these principles in the church, you'll see results. When you come down front, when you meet people back, these 7 principles. In Matthew 19, the New Living Translation says, some parents brought their children to Jesus so he could lay his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples scolded the parents for bothering him. They said, look, he's busy. He's doing God's work. He doesn't have time. But Jesus said, let the children come to me. Don't stop them. What did he say? I'm available. No matter how busy I am, I'm available. You know what it said to those kids and to the parents? Wow. He really cares. I'm important. You're an employee. You want to see the boss. You go to the secretary and say, I need to see Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. and so-and-so. Well, Jeff, he's so busy, he can't see anyone right now. You'll have to come back later. But it's really important. I'm sorry, he can't see you. And then the employee says, look, lady, will you do your job and go tell him I want to see him? Okay, I will. Goes in, sir, so-and-so is out here and wants to see you. Well, send him in. But sir, you're really busy. Well, I'll say, well, sir, you got all these things to do. Send him in. And go back out and said, okay, he wants to see you. How would that make you feel to that boss? Important. Important. Well, he doesn't have time to see you. Well, if only I was more important. This is how everyone rationalizes. If only I was more important, he or she would have time for me. Usually that has nothing to do with it. But that's how we process it. Boy, that's how our children process it, dads. When we don't have time for our children, I am not important enough. Whew. When a child starts thinking that, it takes a lot of positive to overcome it. I came home from a long trip. Boy, I was tired. We lived in outside of Dallas. And Dottie met me at the door, and my daughter Heather. And my daughter said, Daddy, can we go to the mall together? She loved going to the mall with me, not to buy stuff, just to walk around, hang on hands, get a Coke, and just talk and go into stores and look. But she never looked at buying something. And Dottie said, honey, your dad's very tired. He can't. And boy, and I was tired. And I just reached down and I said, oh, honey, that sounds great. Get your stuff, what you need. Let me change clothes and let's go. Boy, that was a hard afternoon for me. But let me tell you, I would do it again. What it said to my daughter was, it doesn't matter what verbally I said, my actions said, I am important to my daddy. He wants to spend time with me. That's the fastest way to get your child to feel they're important to you. Or your employee. Is to be available. I was in my office. I had a book. I had to finish. A contract was breathing down my back. I was on the last chapter, and I was writing away at my roll-top desk. And my son, 2, 3 years old probably, just a little guy, came in, said, Daddy, and my fathering skills were so honed, I didn't even have to think how to respond. I said, son, I'm busy right now. Let me talk with you later. So what does a 2-year-old do with that? Come on. He turned around and walked out. Within about 45 seconds, his mother came into that room. I made the second mistake. Honey, not now. Whoa. Men, when we make mistakes like that, we know it immediately. She came over, put her hand down on my notes, and literally pointed her finger at me. Now, my wife, you have to understand, she hates conflict. I run to conflict. I love conflict. She runs from conflict. She wants everything in the family to always be peaceful. And she looked at me and she said, honey, you better listen to me. Ew. That's not my wife. She said, I know you're busy. You're always going to have a chapter to write, a book to finish. You're always going to have preparation for a talk to give. You're always going to have somewhere to give a talk. But you always won't have, I think he was 2 years old, a 2-year-old son that wants to come in and sit in his daddy's lap. And she turned around and walked out. I didn't need to hear that at that time. Well, I went to my knees. And I said, Lord, forgive me. And I made a commitment to the Lord. And I have tried my best to stick to it this day. I said, God, I will never, ever, ever, ever put my family before my ministry. Never. And usually at that point, somebody yells out, you're saying it wrong. I wish one of you had because I love it. No. I think one of the most ungodly things you can do is put your family before your work, before your ministry, before your job, before your church. Why? Dottie, Kelly, Katie, Heather, and Sean, they don't come before my ministry. They are my first ministry. Let me tell you, man, that's huge. That literally transformed my attitude. That my family does not come before my ministry because my family is my first ministry. And I'll be out on the road. And I've given over 27,000 talks in my life in 179 countries. That's probably more than anyone ever has in history. And I came home and I was tired. We lived up in Julian, California. And every time I come home that tired, before I open that door, I take a deep breath and I remind myself, I am walking into my first ministry. When I open that door, I reach down, I pull up every ounce of energy that I have in natural enthusiasm. And I start my first ministry. I'd often come home way back before I learned some of these things, and Katie said, Daddy, can you go and do this with me? And Dottie would say, honey, your father just got home. He's really tired. Not now. I don't care how tired I am. I want to, by faith, reach down and pull up that energy. And enthusiastically, not say, okay. No, okay, honey, let's go. And oh, have I benefited from that down through the years. I wish I could say it was always easy to be obedient. Maybe you find it easy. I haven't. But I thank God that when we do it by faith, God always honors it. And you know what? My little son came in, he was holding a football. And what he wanted, because I went back out and found him and said, son, what do you want to do? He just wanted me to go out and play catch with him. I always have a book to write. I got over 150 out. I always talk to give. I'll be close to 30,000 soon. I'll have another country to go to. Always need to go to Texas, everything. But I won't always have a 2-year-old son who wants to play catch with his daddy. And boy, did I get some priorities in my life straightened out. My family does not come before my ministry. My family is my first ministry. My family does not come before my job. My family is my first job. It doesn't matter how successful I am at ministry. If I fail with my family, I failed in my ministry. There was a person for Moody Monthly was doing a cover article on me. I don't think Moody Monthly's around anymore. It used to be that and Christianity Today, the two main magazines. And she came to my house where we lived up in Julian, up in the mountains out of San Diego. And of course, they always try to find something negative on you. And so she took my son. She said, "Can I talk to your children?" I know what she wanted. I said, "Sure." She went back and she talked to Sean. Chit-chat and says, "What's the one thing you don't like about your dad?" "He travels a lot." Oh, you could see her mind clicking, you know, the lights going on. Man, I can nail him now. And she came in, and as she was leaving, I found out what she'd written down, my son had said. So I said, "Look, before you leave, I want to call my son in here, and you ask him, what do you like most about your father?" She said, "Why?" I wasn't quite sure, but I said, "Let me do it." I said, "Sean, come in here." And she said, "What do you like most about your father?" And he said, "He spends time with me." She didn't change it in the article. But I said, if the one thing my son doesn't like about his dad, I'm not always home, that's a compliment. And if the one thing he doesn't say about his dad, he spends time with me, I'm in trouble. I never want my kids to say, "I don't mind my dad being on the road." Now, when my kids graduated from high school, they'd probably already been in 35 countries. I couldn't have traveled the way I've traveled over the year if I didn't take my family with me. Very seldom did I leave on trips that one of my kids wasn't with me. And as a result, it scares me if I'd been home the whole time. I wonder if I could have had such a great family. If I was home when I ruined it, it was sure a bit more fruitful being on the road, but spending time with them. Availability. Then, back with availability. I was doing a meeting in Iowa. It was during the presidential campaign for George Bush Jr., W, I guess you call him. And he came to the meeting, which was good politically because it was a huge crowd. And he sat right in the front row. As soon as I spoke, he jumped up and came right up and started talking with me. And I've got some pictures of it, which I hang on my wall. Say, "Oh, that's kind of foolish." You do the same thing. Unless you were a Democrat. Maybe you'd put a target on it. But my son walked up to me and said, "Daddy." I turned to the President of the United States. I said, "Excuse me, sir, but my son needs his daddy's attention. I'll be right back." So I turned around and said, "What is it, Sean?" And we chit-chatted. As soon as I finished, Bush just said, "Thank you," and he left. Walked right out of the room. I thought, ooh, looks like I really offended him. But if I did, that was his problem, not mine. Because even the President of the United States does not come before my family. Not even close. There's many presidents, there's only one family. And he sent me a note that I have printed, and I have a condo down in Mexico on the beach. And when you walk in, there's this big window right next to it. I printed the note. Yeah, I know. You do the same thing. He said, "Thank you for taking time to talk to your child." And what he did, the reason he walked right out, he went out to his car, asked his security to get out, locked the doors, called his two daughters, and spent an hour talking with his daughters on the phone. And I thought, wow, even a president of the United States needs an example of a father spending time with his child. And then next, affection. Affection. When we express affection to a child, to anyone, It says to them, I am lovable. Every kid is going to prove to him or herself that they're lovable. Every kid will, one way or another. And God intended that to come immediately from the daddy and the mommy. Expressing affection. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way that I have loved you. John 15. There's two ways to express affection. I had to learn to express it verbally. I developed a goal. I wanted each one of my kids every day to hear me say it, or the equivalent of it, I love you. I love you. 10 times a day. Now, very seldom. Some days I had 15. But most days I didn't reach 10. Maybe 2, 3, or 4. But if I don't have a goal, I probably wouldn't have reached 4 any one of those days. But I needed a goal to keep me on board, expressing to my children verbal affection. I remember one time with I don't know which child it was. I went to bed and I realized, oh my gosh, I got home and everything, and I never told her I loved her. So I got out of bed. It was about 1 a.m, went into her room, leaned over and whispered, I love you, honey. She was awake. She looked up and says, thanks, Dad. Boy, am I glad I did that. You know, the last thing I wanted to do was get out of bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and walk through the house. Our kids need to hear us, I love you, or something equivalent to that. Oh, Heather, if I had to do it all over again, your mother and I would want you to be our daughter. Then express it with I emphasize here, appropriate physical expression. With a hug, with a kiss, arm around the shoulder, holding their hand. Our kids are crying out. If we've expressed it verbally and built a relationship with them, they're crying out for us to express it in an appropriate physical way. With the arm around the shoulder, holding the hand, a kiss in the cheek, etc. They're crying out for that. Express appropriate. I took my son with 3 of his friends and my daughter Kelly with 2 of her friends who are all Laker fans. And I got some complimentary Laker tickets. So I had a van, we piled everybody into it and went to a Lakers game up at the Stapleton. And we had to park to get it cheap way across the big parking lot there. And as we're walking across, all of a sudden I realized my daughter had reached down and put her fingers through mine with her friends right there, everything, and we were holding her hands and walking. I got to tell you, that was like a shot of adrenaline in my life. But you know, if I hadn't done that with her when she was younger, she wouldn't have done that with me when she was older. If you love them when they're young, they'll love you when you're older. If you kiss them on the cheek when they're young, they'll kiss you on the cheek when they're older. If you put your big fingers between their little tiny fingers when they're young, they'll put their big fingers between your fingers when they're older. And I got to tell you, I love it as an older dad, especially at my age now. And my kids are 40s, in their 30s into their 40s. And yet they still hold my hand. Still hold my hand. I can't tell you how many times in meetings I'd be where, and all of a sudden my son would just reach down and grab my hand and hold it. The other day he grabbed me right here and just didn't let go during a meeting that we were having. And everybody saw it. He just reached over and went like this. And he was kind of saying some of the things I was sharing. He was saying, Dad, keep on. I like what you're saying. But if we didn't do that with our kids when they're younger, they won't do it when they're older. Express affection. Next, there's only 2 left. Next, approach. Another A. Approach their world. When you approach a child's world, when you step into their world, or your employee, somebody in a Bible study, maybe somebody in the Bible study just got a new car that they saved up for a long time. After the Bible study's over, you're walking out and say, hey, I heard you finally got your car. I'm so proud of you. Approach their world where they are. 1 Corinthians 13:4 says, love does not demand its own way. Dads, why do we have to always go with our kids and family where we want to go? Do what we want to do. Eat where we want to eat. Eat what we want to eat. See the movie we want to see. Our kids are real people, most of them. Why can't we do what one of our kids wants to do? Why can't we step into their world? Why can't we step into our wife's world? Our children. And this is what it says here. Does not demand its own way. Approach their world. Often I come home when we lived in Julian, and we lived right in the edge of a Native American, they called it reservation. And so I would come home, and most of my kids had friends most of their friends were Native American. They just hit it off. And I'd come home, and there'd be a number of Native American, others in our house. No matter how tired I was, I'd go over and sit down and chat with them, step into their world. Hey, Jack, how's basketball going? Shelley, have you gotten your grades up? And interacted with them every time. Approach your children's world. Step into their world. Go where they want to go. Do what they want to do. Eat what they want to eat. Eat where they want to eat. Watch the program they want to watch. Maybe you want to watch American football. They want to watch true football. Soccer. Then you turn on and watch soccer with them. Not all the time. A lot of time. Step in to their world. Approach their world. And if you do, I'll guarantee you, they'll step into your world. My daughter came to me, Kelly, and said, Daddy, when I get older, I'm going to be a psychiatrist, and she is now. She said, could we write a book together? I thought, wow, I love that. My daughter wants to step into my world of writing and do it with me. But I already made the commitment I'm never going to write another book. I don't want to. But my other child came to me and said, but you said you'd write a book with me, so it looks like I got 2 more books I'm going to have to write. And then the 7th day, the last one, is accountability. Accountability. When you give, we owe it to our children to give them reasonable limits, reasonable guidelines. And I really emphasize reasonable boundaries. But when we give them limits and guidelines and boundaries, we need to hold their nose to the grindstone in a loving, relational way. We need to hold them accountable, because when we hold a child accountable to do what they should do, it gives them that sense of responsibility. I am responsible. In Romans 14 it says, yes, each of us will give a personal account to God. We will be held responsible for God. What's the best way to hold a child? Be ready for that situation by holding them responsible to their daddy, to their mother. Is the best way to prepare a child. Accountability. The teens that are least prone to heavy drinking, research shows already had parents who scored high on accountability, holding them accountable, and warmth. In fact, if I went on, I'm not going to give you all my notes. I got all this documentation here, incredible, with all the percentages, everything, of an effective father relating to his kids and holding them accountable. I mean, it's parallel to a child becoming involved sexually before marriage or not, is a father holding them accountable in a warm, loving way. A direct correlation. In lying, cheating, even drinking while driving, wearing a seatbelt. They can tie it up directly to the father holding a child accountable in areas in a loving, warm way. Whew. See, here's the problem. When a child is born, their brain is not open. And little by little, it opens. When a child is born, they operate out of their limbic system, which is a small area in the back of their brain. And it's what you call pure emotion. It's where, if you're living out of your limbic system, you see a big hamburger or something, say, I gotta have it. It's all you think about. You demand, I gotta have it. That's not your brain thinking, it's your limbic system. But gradually, as a child grows up, it gradually switches in a child to their prefrontal lobe. This is where God created us to live morally. What? Yes. This is where God created to make moral choices, moral decisions. This is where a child learns, not in the limbic system, up here to discern right from wrong. But you know when that is fully open? Not until a child, they used to say 22 years old, then 25. Now they're saying the prefrontal lobe is not open until 28 to 30 years of age. And they're saying this is why, up to not 10, 12, 14 years old, up to 25 years old. Biologically, a child needs their parents involved in their life making choices. Because their brain is not equipped. It's not open. And the limbic system will not help them to consistently make right moral choices. And I often say that's why God gave kids parents. Because of their brain. Kids in college, brains are not totally open. Not totally functional. Boy, let me tell you, they still need that input from mom and dad on choices, everything. Right down to career choices, everything. And so many parents don't do it. They back off. And research shows some children, because their DNA will act like they're not interested. No, Dad, come on. You know what science, secular science says? Don't give up on that child, and you will win. But so many parents, especially for the I don't know how single moms do it. I don't. I don't know how single moms do it, or single dads. But boy, that's when single moms need mom and dad involved in their family. Oh, for those single moms. They have moms and dad that truly love each other, an exciting marriage that can come along and parent their grandchild. That's one of the greatest blessings of a single mom. Our kids need our involvement. And this is what, you want to take parenting seriously, especially up to 28, 30 years of age? Quote, parents play a critical role in the literal brain development. Do you realize that? Mom and dad, you determine often the size and function of your child's brain up to 28 to 30 years of age? That's scary. And the way a parent parents literally, I don't want to go through all these quotes and documentation of this, literally forms a child's brain the way the parent parents. And they have found that produces the healthiest brain and produces the healthiest behavior is a parent who parents with accountability and warmth. Accountability and warmth. Whew. Now think of this. Different kinds of growing up produces different kinds of brains. I never knew that until about 11 years ago, when Dr. Perry from Baylor University, one of the greatest brain experts in the world, I made him chat a little bit and read some of his works and just blew my mind. And that's when I wish I could have started all over again as a parent, but I had to start right where I was. Different parenting types produces different types of brains. And a parent who's always putting the child down produces a brain that when that child gets older, they get in trouble. They get in trouble. Folks, rules without relationships lead to rebellion. Kids don't respond to rules. They respond to rules in a loving, intimate relationship. Truth, the truth of the gospel, the truth you want to embed in your children's lives. Truth without relationships leads to rejection. But here's even a bigger one. Discipline without relationships. Oh, folks, I would never dream of disciplining a child that did not know absolutely that I loved them. Because ultimately, you'll get the opposite of what you want out of discipline. Discipline without relationships leads to bitterness, resentment, and consequences. It's a relationship, folks. Please take these 7 principles seriously. The pastor would be printing out, if he doesn't have tomorrow, by the next Sunday he will. And you're welcome to have one. According to how many he prints, just don't print them. Don't publish them. I have so many people take my material, just put their name on it and publish it. I'll give it to anyone, but I won't let you plagiarize it. But you can print it off and give it to your kids, whatever you want. But I would say this, Dad. If you got 2 or 3 kids, take them out to the special restaurant, print off 4 copies, one for you, one for each of them, but then, Dad, walk through it. And there might be some of those points you're going to have to ask your children's forgiveness. And that could be one of the healthiest things you could do for your child, and walk them through it. There's 2 books over there. Wow, they're way over there. One is called The Father Factor, How You Can Make a Difference in Your Child's Life. And then one of my all-time favorites, 10 Commitments for Dads, How to Have an Awesome Impact on Your Kids. These are over there in the shade, so if you're sitting in the sun, you can get a little shade while you buy them. I don't get anything from my books. It's been millions it's brought in, I mean multi-million, but every dollar is given away. Every dollar is given away. I'm on staff at Campus Crusade for Christ. I raise my own support. I get a letter from the boss, and he says, we've just given you a raise. And the last paragraph says, now go out and raise it. But I'm on staff at Crew. I raise my own support. My whole income is totally limited by Crew, everything. And all the royalties are given away. About 40% stay in the United States, 60% abroad, to see young people come to Christ. And they've been in the multi-millions. And I'm thankful for that. But I live well. I do. But I don't live off my work. I live off some good investments that I made with a little money, but they paid off. Yeah. Folks, thank you for this privilege. And this has been so good. I live in Dana Point, south of here. Look, if you get real lonely, maybe you ran out of money, you get down to Dana Point, no place to stay, you're really hungry, you don't have any tickets for Disneyland or anything, call me. I'm in the phone book. Look me up and call me, and I'll pray for you. Thank you.